Savarkar in London, 1906 to 1910. Preface. Vinaya Damodar Savarkar, popularly known as Veer Savarkar, was the unsung hero of the Indian freedom struggle against the British rule, 1906 to 47. He made an outstanding contribution to this great cause. Leaders like Gandhi, Nehru and Bose adopted Savarkar's main philosophies, but many years later, at the time of the Indian independence in 1947, many prominent leaders of the Congress Party, including its president, were members of Savarkar's secret revolutionary society, called the Abhinav Bharat. He was the main source of their inspiration and, yet, was never given any credit for this. Savarkar suffered terribly for 27 years at the hands of the English rulers. He spent 10.5 years of hard labor in jail, in Andaman Islands, 1,000 miles off east coast of India, followed by further 3 years in various jails in India and then 13.5 years in internment there as well. Despite having suffered this appalling persecution by the British rulers, Savarkar had the greatness to proclaim, "I never hated the English, just because they were English." He sincerely believed in the universal brotherhood of man. In prison, Savarkar also faced religious fanaticism from Muslims. Although he was in a helpless condition, he fought against their tyranny and defeated them and in the end won their respect. Yet he said in 1927, "I never hated Muslims nor even despised them." He was truly a humanist. During his internment of 13.5 years, Savarkar was forced to live in a remote place called Ratnagiri and could move within the district but was forbidden to take part in politics. Undaunted by this, he concentrated on the task of social reforms and had to fight against the entrenched attitudes of orthodox people. By 1933, with his sheer resourcefulness, he had managed to achieve 4 incredible social changes in Ratnagiri. Asterisk removal of the practice of untouchability. Asterisk dining together by Hindus of all castes, including untouchables. Asterisk opening up of a new temple for all Hindus including untouchables. Asterisk running of a cafe open to all Hindus including untouchables. After his release from the internment in 1937, Savarkar fearlessly opposed Gandhi's policy of perpetual capitulation to Muslim demands, as it was clearly proving to be disastrous to the nation. For this reason, Savarkar was much misunderstood and maligned, which unfortunately continues to be the case even today. But unlike many public figures of his times, he did not abandon his principles to suit the public mood. There are 5 main phases of his life: childhood and youth, 1883 to 1906, in London, 1906 to 1910, in prison on the Andaman Islands and in India, 1911 to 1924, in internment in Ratnagiri, 1924-1937. After release from internment, 1937-1966, Savarkar started to write his autobiography in the 1930s, but British administrators forbade such writing. He therefore started to write it after the Indian independence in 1947. First part, dealing with his childhood and reviewing the political situation in India from 1857 to 1906, was published in Marathi in 1952. The second part of the autobiography, dealing with his work in London, 1906 to 10, was published in Marathi in 1965. It gives me great pleasure in translating that part in English for the benefit of wider reading public. This book should be read in conjunction with another book, Newsletters from London, sent by Savarkar. Savarkar shows us how the Indian freedom struggle moved through the following phases. 1. Prayers, petitions and deputations of the moderates. 2. Swadeshi or sponsoring of indigenous Indian industries and boycott of British goods by the militants. 3. Home Rule movement of Shyamji Krishna Verma. 4. Armed revolution of Savarkar. Savarkar reviews movements of other leaders and tells us how he changed the minds of Indian youth and also of the elder Indians in London. I quote 2 well-known examples. Asterisk Mr. C.D. Deshmukh stood first in the ICS examination in 1919. But he was not sure whether he should join the civil service or join the Indian freedom struggle. He sought advice of Tilak, father of the Indian unrest, who was in London at that time. He told Deshmukh, "Everyone is not cut out for politics. After independence, we will require capable and experienced administrators. So, do join in the Indian civil service." Deshmukh became finance minister in Nehru's cabinet in 1952. Asterisk Subhash Chandra Bose stood forth in the ICS examination in 1920. He expressed his anguish, I have been getting heaps of congratulations on my standing forth in the competitive examination. But I cannot say that I am delighted at the prospect of entering the ranks of the ICS. If I have to join this service, I shall do so with as much reluctance as I started my study for the ICS examination with. A nice fat income with a good pension in afterlife, in retirement, I shall surely get. But after all, is service to be the be-all and end-all of my life? The civil service can bring one all kinds of worldly comfort, but are not these acquisitions made at the expense of one's soul? Netaji, Collected Works, page 208, eventually Bose decided not to join the ICS, but to take part in India's freedom struggle. This change in mental attitude was the result of Savarkar's work in London. Note, in June 1940, after the Dunkirk episode, Bose called on Savarkar in Bombay, and on his advice, he slipped out of India, first to Germany and then to Japan. Bose formed the Indian National Army out of prisoners of war held by the Japanese. Unfortunately, Japan surrendered after atom bombs were dropped on its cities by the U.S. in August 1945, and 8 days later Bose himself died in a plane crash. But it became clear to the British rulers that the loyalty of the Indian Army could no longer be taken for granted. They had no choice but to leave India. Savarkar gives glimpse of how numerous unknown individuals had helped in his armed revolutionary movement. One should remember that his scholarship was not sufficient even to cover cost of boarding and lodging in England, let alone for other expenses. He had to seek help from his father-in-law to make ends meet. It would be appropriate to describe here with Savarkar's life in London in more detail. Why did Savarkar come to London? He says that he came to London to observe at first hand the strengths of the British people that enabled them to rule over India, and also to note their weaknesses and to think of ways of overcoming their strengths and taking advantages of their weaknesses to achieve India's freedom. To meet students from all parts of India. Such meetings were much more easier in London than in India. People back home looked to these men with admiration and expected direction and leadership from them. According to report, Indian students in UK, compiled by Secretary of State for India in 1907, there were some 700 of them in UK at that time. More than half of this number were in London. To kindle the spirit of fighting among these youth for achieving Indian independence. To meet professionals, Rajas, merchants and rich people, who came to London and also possibly visited Europe. Savarkar sought their assistance too in the freedom struggle. To establish contacts with revolutionaries of other countries like Russia, China, Ireland, Turkey, Egypt and Iran. He wanted to learn the art of making bombs from them, and put that knowledge and friendship into use for concerted attempts to overthrow the British rule. He also wanted to smuggle pistols and ammunition into India. We should make note of the changes that revolutionaries of other countries had brought about in their respective countries. In Iran, a nationalist movement became active in December 1905. In August 1906, the Shah, Muzaffaruddin, admitting the need for reforms, granted a constitution and established a National Assembly, Majlis. In 1907, Shah Muzaffar died to be succeeded by the despotic Shah Muhammad Ali Shah. He tried to reverse the liberal policies of his predecessor, but violence erupted, with Russia backing the Shah and Britain on the side of the constitutionalists, who wanted the Majlis to survive. The constitutionalists won the day. In December 1911, Chinese overthrew their monarchy and China became a republic under Sun Yat-sen. Bolshevik revolution took place in Russia in October 1917. Turks overthrew their Sultan and Turkey became a republic in 1923 with Kemal Pasha, Ataturk, as its first president. In Ireland, the Easter Uprising in 1916 failed, but Irish Free State was granted in 1921. The speed with which Savarkar's activities took place in London was breathtaking. He started regular Sunday meetings to discuss various topics related to India's future. It soon became popular among Indian students. Revolutionaries from other countries such as Egypt, Ireland, Russia, China and Turkey including Lenin used to attend. One of the topics of discussion was future constitution of India. These meetings were intended to increase knowledge of all current affairs of the participants. Savarkar was able to maintain this tradition even in jail later on the Andaman Islands during 1911 to 1921. 2. Savarkar organized the days of the remembrance of our illustrious forefathers like Shiv Jayanti, birthday of Shivaji, and celebrations of our festivals like Diwali, Festival of Lights, and Dasra. He wanted the revival of our culture, our values, our concepts, and our traditions. And above all, he wanted to instill the spirit of self-respect in the Indian people. 3. Abhinav Bharat, Savarkar started his secret revolutionary society, the Abhinav Bharat, similar to Young Italy of Mazzini, in India in 1905. Oath taken by members of the Abhinav Bharat has been preserved by the British Secret Police. The words, absolute political independence, mentioned in it are significant. At the time of Indian independence in August 1947, many leaders of the Congress Party were members of this secret society. They included Bal Saheb Khair, Chief Minister of Bombay Province, Ravishankar Shukla, Chief Minister of Central Province, Sikandar Hayat Khan, the Muslim Chief Minister of Punjab, just to name a few. President of the Congress Party Acharya J.B. Kripalni himself was a member of Abhinav Bharat. Aspects of Savarkar's work in London, 1906-1910. 1. Literature. A. Biography of Mazzini. Savarkar was very much impressed by Mazzini, who led the freedom struggle of Italians against the Austrians in the 19th century. As he studied Mazzini's autobiography and his thoughts, he was surprised that he himself was advocating the same tactics as Mazzini. His confidence increased tremendously. Savarkar wanted to emphasize to his readers that freedom from the British rule would not be won easily. It would involve tremendous sacrifices over several decades, and that Indian freedom fighters would have to face many moments of utter despair. In such times, he pointed to Mazzini's struggle for inspiration. Savarkar wrote in Marathi a biography of Mazzini. 2,000 copies of the first edition were quickly sold in 1907. When the second edition was due to be printed, the British administration in India declared the book as seditious and banned it. B. Indian War of Independence 1857. In 1857, there was a massive uprising in India against the rule of the English East India Company, which managed to suppress it. But that uprising, war, always inspired Savarkar and his followers. After extensive search in the India Office Library, Savarkar wrote the history of the forgotten 1857 Indian War. It may sound strange, but contemporary English authors did not dub it as the Sepoy Mutiny. They invariably called it the Indian Mutiny, accepting the fact that the whole of India wanted to get rid of their rule. If they used the word Sepoy, soldier, at all, they called it the Great Sepoy War. Savarkar wrote the above book in Marathi. It was translated into English by his friends and secretly published in Holland in 1909. The government of India promptly banned it on 23 July 1909. The book was a great source of inspiration to Indian revolutionaries for the next 38 years, including Bose, mentioned above. Asterisk copies of the book were available from Madame Kama at 25 Rue de Ponthieu, Champs-Élysées, Paris. Price 10 shillings. Asterisk copies were also available from F.H. Publication, 749 3rd Avenue, New York. Price cloth $2, paper edition $1.50. C. History of 6 are an important part of the Hindu society. In the Indian army their percentage was quite high. Savarkar therefore learned Gurumukhi and studied their holy books, Adi Granth, Panth Prakash and Vichikra Natak. He prepared notes for his book, History of the Sikhs, which he completed while in Paris. Unfortunately, the manuscript was lost by his friend for fear of being arrested by the police. D. Newsletters during the period from 17 August 1906 to 26 November 1909. Savarkar sent 43 newsletters to Marathi newspapers explaining the strengths and weaknesses of the British people. These were also related to politics and current affairs. E. Leaflets. 3 leaflets were printed in India House. I. Choose, O Indian princes. This was sent out to Indian princes, Rajas and Maharajas, after Dhingra's martyrdom in August 1909. Savarkar appealed to them to join in the freedom struggle. He appealed to them for their help in the freedom struggle. He said, the Indian freedom struggle has started. It will go on until India is free from the British rule. His salient points were, if you cooperate, there could be room for various types of administrations in future India. Look at Germany. All the princes accepted Kaiser William of Prussia as their emperor in 1871. The princely states remained, but Germany became one nation. India is your motherland too. You are slaves of the British, just like us. Side with us, and one of you will become Maharaja of the whole of India. If not, at least remain neutral. If you do not cooperate, even your names will not be remembered by the future generations. This leaflet was mentioned in the Times of London on 22nd August 1910. 2. A leaflet in Gurumukhi. This appealed to the Sikh soldiers to rebel against the British. 3. O martyrs. This was addressed to the fighters of the 1857 war. Savarkar assured them, "Your blood, O martyrs, shall be avenged. We will continue your fight and drive the British out of India." F. Bomb manual * copies of bomb manual were printed in India House. One copy did reach Tilak in Pune. To India on the international scene in August 1907, the International Socialist Conference was held in Stuttgart in Germany. Savarkar sent Madame Kama as India's representative. It is here that the first Indian national flag was unfurled. It had 8 lotuses to represent 8 major provinces of India, sun and moon to show the eternity of India, and the famous words, Vande Mataram. 3. Homage to the martyrs of the 1857 war. Savarkar organized a function in May 1908 to pay homage to the Indian martyrs of the 1857 war of independence against the rule of the East India Company. His friends and the participants vowed to carry on their struggle till India became free. 4. The fire spreads. Influenced by Savarkar's work, there arose a succession of revolutionaries. The list extends from Khudiram Bose, 1908, to Udham Singh, 1945. Trials and tribulations. Despite having completed his studies, Savarkar was not called to the bar in May 1909 by the benchers of Gray's Inn. He was arrested in London in July 1910, sent to Mumbai, Bombay, to stand trial for sedition and attempting to overthrow the British Raj. When the ship carrying him was anchored at the French port of Marseilles, Savarkar made a dramatic attempt to escape by jumping through a porthole and swimming ashore. Though Savarkar was on the French soil, British police inspectors who pursued him, arrested him and took him back to the ship, without obtaining permission from the French authorities. This was in flagrant violation of the international law, an insult to France. But, because Britain was the world power, the British authorities thought that they would get away with this. Supporters of Savarkar raised this issue in the French newspapers. Eventually, the episode resulted in the hearing at the International Court of Justice in Hague in January 1911. It gave its verdict on 14 February 1911. Though Savarkar was not returned to France, the case created a great sensation throughout Europe. Europeans became aware of the fact that the Indians wanted to overthrow the British rule. When Savarkar was brought in front of the special judge in Bombay, he stated, "My case is due to be heard before the International Court of Justice in The Hague. The proceedings in India should therefore be postponed till the International Court gives its verdict." This request was refused, as the British rulers were most anxious to send Savarkar to jail. Charges against Savarkar were waging war against King Emperor and conspiracy to wage war against King Emperor. He was sentenced to transportation for life twice to be served in succession, a sentence unprecedented in the history of the British Empire. His experiences of this sentence can be read in his book My Transportation for Life. A request for the reader. It is expected that the readers have elementary knowledge of Indian politics during the period 1857 to 1906. If not, they should refer to Appendix C for explanations of various terms and details of personalities. During the last 100 years, words have acquired different meanings. This should be borne in mind when reading this book. The word militant, used for some Indian leaders in 1905, has a different meaning today. Dr. V.S. Godbole, 14 Turnberry Walk, Bedford, MK 41, 8 AZ UK.